Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Advocate Janine Boltman. I am a family law specialist, and today's webinar is about the impact of COVID-19 on family law, particularly in South Africa, the country in which I am currently practicing. So the impact of COVID-19 on people's professional and private lives is overwhelmingly dominant at present, particularly internationally. It's overwhelmingly dominant. And the reality is that there is a greater need for people to exercise what we in South Africa know as the spirit of Ubuntu, the spirit of cooperation, the spirit of togetherness, the spirit of respect, and particularly the spirit of cooperation during this time. Which leads me to today's webinar session, being the impact of COVID-19 on families, and particularly family law. So the start of lockdown has met families with many realities, and one such reality that many people don't expect me to chat about this morning or this afternoon is the reality of death. Suddenly, as humankind, we are curtailed from celebrating the lives of our loved ones in the way that we hoped, or not being able to celebrate people's lives in the way that we hoped to have celebrated it. And for now, unfortunately, this is our new reality. Suddenly, for instance, in South Africa, we need to be saddled with the exasperating task and very emotional task of interpreting regulations during this time, and the regulations particularly pertaining to funerals and how we conduct ourselves during funerals. In South Africa, attendees of funerals and the movement of attendees between provinces, districts, metros is only extended to immediate family, to your partner, to your husband or your wife, to the deceased's siblings, to the deceased parents, grandparents, and daughters and sons-in-laws. And we are also only allowed to congregate in groups of 50 or less, as no larger groups are currently allowed, and we also need to practice the regulations when conducting such funerals. And when we need to attend funerals, we are required to have permits for travel between districts and provinces, and these permits are attained from police stations, alternatively from magistrates' courts. And when requesting such permits, we are required to have proof of death, so your death certificate, the deceased death certificate, together with a letter from the religious leader or person who is going to be conducting the funeral, and or a sworn affidavit which must be presented to the official which will be authorizing the permit. So sadly, we are curtailed with these restrictions, and we are left to mourn under these trying times under the regulations which are currently in place and which are currently our new normal. The second topic for today's webinar is the impact of COVID-19 on parents, particularly unmarried and divorced parents, for a number of reasons. The closing down of schools has placed a greater pressure on families, not only financially, but has increased a need for childcare, and has a daunting task on all parents, which will certainly affect the matters pertaining to high conflict divorces or high conflict relationships and legal battles. Level 4 lockdown measures are currently in place in South Africa, and legal practitioners are allowed to execute on the instructions of many of their clients by either finalizing divorces as the courts allow therefore, or actually executing or instituting divorce proceedings, as we in South Africa are in need of serving documents, or we are required to serve documents on the other party via a sheriff. The sheriff of the court is now under lockdown measures able to run their services, and we are able to execute divorce summonses or proceed to serve divorce summonses on the other party within the confines of exercising COVID-19 safety regulations. Practitioners, as I stated before, are allowed to execute or finalize divorce proceedings in that courts with the strict exercise of COVID-19 safety regulations can now make final orders of divorce, either personally allowing access to the public or access to the public in respect of court buildings, or virtually, in some aspects virtually. Unfortunately, at this time, we have not yet received any regulations from the Minister of Justice, and we are not yet as certain as to how the courts are going to open its doors to the public, particularly the public that has no access to virtual technology. But I'm sure that it will be within the regulated COVID-19 safety regulations, and access to justice will be able to be will be allowed. However, the pandemic and its financial implications on the value of patrimonial assets has made divorces or the settlement of divorces quite problematic, and it is best that, or it is envisaged, or my opinion, that divorces in respect of patrimonial assets and the value of patrimonial assets be postponed for now. As we know, financially, the impact of COVID-19 has had on the value of assets, on share values of investments and unit trusts. So it becomes difficult when one has to calculate, or when legal practitioners have to calculate the value of patrimonial assets within the joint estate, and therefore it is advised, it is in my opinion, that parties should put a hold on divorce proceedings until we have reached some sort of normal post lockdown or the regulation or post-lockdown. So I'm going to urge parties that negotiations to be very well to be halted at this time. What is important during this time is that courts will, if any, allow for interim orders to the best of the current situation, particularly when it comes to the interest or the best interests of children. Courts will continue to hold their interests as paramount under these trying times. And we encourage parents, and I'm encouraging parents to, during this time, at least reach an amicable agreement which will allow access, or care and access, or care and control, or care and access in respect of minor children. And that we continue holding the best interests of the children as paramount when negotiating the care and access, as well as financial arrangements in respect of children. In the instance of care and contact provisions pertaining to children, unmarried or divorced parents may continue to share contact and may be able or are able to transport children between their respective homes. For parents residing in the same metro or district, children may be moved between homes provided that there is that the parent who is transporting the child to the second home, provided that that parent has a court order in his or her possession, alternatively has an endorsed parenting plan by the Office of the Family Advocate, alternatively has an unabridged birth certificate which verifies that the parent transporting the child is in fact the parent. If these documents are not present, a permit is required, which you can attain from a magistrate's court. Now, if parents reside in different metros or different districts or provinces, a permit is required from a magistrate, and you would need to approach the court for this purpose. Provided that the home that the child is going to be transported to has not had any exposure to COVID-19. Internationally or international contact, this is a serious problem, or this has a serious impact on all families, as travel is now curtailed and we are not allowed to travel any longer. And we encourage that in such instances, parents continue keeping the lines of communication open with their children virtually, whether it be by telephone, Zoom, Skype, WhatsApp video calls that will allow the interaction and the relationship to continue between parent and child. In extreme instances, parties or parents are allowed to urgently approach the court if any one of their rights is being infringed upon. Depending on the urgency of the matter, the court will then attend or will attempt to attend to the matter urgently and immediately. So it is evident that as noted before, the spirit of Ubuntu, as I've explained earlier on, the spirit of negotiation, the spirit of cooperation, the spirit of respect, be implemented in the lives of so many households across the world. Another area of concern in family law is that of maintenance, and maintenance particularly pertaining to children. Now, as mentioned before, financially COVID-19 has had a financial impact on each one of us. And in many instances, most families, most parents are receiving their full salaries. If you are receiving your full salary, please do ensure that you continue maintaining your children and adhering to the maintenance obligations on you as a parent. It is your responsibility to continue maintaining your child or your children as far as possible. In other instances, most parents have been financially affected, and in most instances, their salaries have either been cut by 50% or have been reduced, or in most instances, or in many instances, many parents are not currently receiving an income. If that is your situation, I once again urge each one of us to exercise the spirit of Ubuntu. Make contact with the parent, with the other parent, and try and negotiate terms that will best suit all of the parties, keeping in mind that we need to maintain and uphold the best interests of the children even during these difficult times. So I'm going to urge all families, or I'm urging all families to keep the lines of communication open between you and reach a settlement agreement. Once a settlement agreement is reached, you may contact your legal practitioner. The legal practitioner can then endeavor to make an application to the maintenance court in order to make your interim order and your interim agreement an interim order of court. Once lockdown has lifted and our financial positions have gone back to being normal, we can then have the maintenance orders be put back in place. So I urge all parents and families to reach an agreement as far as possible. Another daunting task with which we are also faced as a result of this pandemic is that there has been a rise in domestic violence matters. The rate of abuse has risen and has increased at a dramatic rate. Again, courts are at the urgent assistance of many victims who find themselves at the hands of an abuser. In South Africa, we have in place call centers which victims of gender-based violence or any sort of violence can contact and can seek assistance. Alternatively, if Alternatively, you may approach a domestic violence court in your district, in your magisterial area, and you may apply for domestic violence interdict. Domestic violence interdict will then, an interim domestic violence interdict will then be granted, and you would be assisted in that way. But the courts, I urge and reiterate that the courts are at everyone's assistance in respect of domestic violence at this time. Please do make use of the services of your legal practitioner or your courts or legal aid, which is a service offered by the state which allows people access to legal representation free of charge. You may also approach your legal practice councils in your provincial, in your provinces, and you may request the services of an attorney pro bono, on a pro bono basis. So South Africa is endeavoring to uphold the spirit of the law pertaining to families as far as they can, and especially in light of the situation which we all find ourselves, and that is COVID-19. And I urge each one of us to also use the social medium platforms which are available to all of us via Facebook. There are many legal platforms. Please do join my platform called Let Your Legal Experts Assist You on Facebook. And we urge you to please place any question or direct message me if you have a question relating to any family law aspect that you are faced with. Again, South African courts are endeavoring to increase access to justice as far as possible within the limitations or within the restrictions of the COVID-19 regulations. Should there be any questions pertaining to any of the topics which I have briefly touched on during the session, I'm going to kindly ask, or I'm going to ask that you submit these questions via this webinar, and that I will endeavor to answer the questions as we end this webinar today. So any questions I will be answering post this webinar. I thank you each one and all for tuning in or watching this session, and I urge you to kindly share this webinar to any interested parties. Thank you.